having to look a wife in the eyes or a mom in the eyes and, try to give them some kind of peace on why their son died. Or why their husband died, There's always the knowledge that you're going to have to do that. And not only are you going to have to do it once, you're going to be responsible to some degree for that individual and their family for the rest of your life. From a leadership perspective, I kind of unpack it a couple of ways. Mm-hmm. And that always weighs on you, right, at a personal level. That was my only problem with just like turning it loose, is because if you want to find a gunfight in Afghanistan or Iraq, you're going to find a gunfight. I mean, these people are your friends too. Like you grew up with them, and there's a deep, deep bond. And so keeping them alive, first and foremost. And if there is going to be loss, it needs to fucking matter.
Welcome to Mic Drop, the podcast where relevancy is irrelevant and we don't give a shit about your feelings.
Asking any organization in D.C. to police itself.
Yeah, it's lost fucking cause. Yeah. Were all three of your deployments to Afghanistan similar in terms of, because by the time you went there, you were fairly senior, right?
Yep.
So were all three deployments from where you sat more of a leadership type of position? I mean, were you going out with the guys much, or?
Yep. The first deployment, in as you said, in every one of those, pretty senior guy in my career. I was, I think I was like 15 years in for the first deployment I did. Found myself working a lot at the operations level, launching, recovering multiple teams at a time, running the operations center on my first deployment. Led a couple of missions as a task force commander with Afghan forces, kind of maneuver, but battalion plus type maneuver, which was pretty wild because it was several hundred Afghans, about 50 Green Berets, a couple of howitzer pieces. Actually,
Wild West.
It was, and it was the first time in history that level of maneuver warfare with the ANA had happened up in Uruzgan province, and had the opportunity to be the mission commander for that one. But the preponderance of my work, Mike, was command and control of teams that were going out multiple times, pushing them out, pulling them back, medevacs, fires. And, it gave me a perspective of the country and how vast this mission was and what we were up against trying to do this thing. My last deployment was radically different in the sense that at that point I had already turned down command and was going to knock out one more deployment before I retired. And it was this mission called the Village Stability Mission, or Village Stability Operations. And it was kind of a modern day Magnificent Seven of SF getting back to its roots and living in local villages and helping those folks stand up on their own. And that was by far, for me, the most rewarding deployment of all the ones that I did, because it really allowed me to get back to my roots. I think it allowed the special ops community to get back into living in the communities and really going native in a lot of ways. And, it was a pretty effective program. Yeah. And I think had we done some version of that right after 9/11 and stayed with it for the long haul, plus building up the commandos and the Afghan special forces, I think it could have been a different long-term fit outcome. Yeah. But that mission was radically different. I found myself traveling around the country with a cultural advisor, just helping stand villages up, putting teams in them, dealing with the elders, and then going to the next village. And that was pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm going to take a quick break. I do want to let you guys know the way that you can support the show is to support our sponsors. I know some people don't like to hear ads, but that's how I do what I do for a living. So any support you can show for our gracious sponsors is much appreciated. And again, it does support the show. So thank you. What are the two key components for canine success? That's effective training and proper nutrition. Fueled by Team Dog brings those two components to your family and best friend. The perfect nutritional balance that results in a higher mental acuity, energy, overall vitality, and even an improved appearance. Every product you will find in my company's store was born from the battlefield and not from the boardroom. Let my life's work help you become your dog's hero. It's fascinating to have you sitting here to interview, because I've had a lot of enlisted Green Berets that have been under commands. Maybe even some of them have been under your command. And one of the questions that I ask pretty much all of them is that, when you got into country, was there a definitive understanding for you, not you, but them, of why you were there and kind of what the overall objective was? And for a lot of them, it's no, not really.
Yeah.
And to me, I find that both surprising and disappointing. It's one thing if an 0300 infantry Marine that's 19 doesn't get the big mish, and doesn't have a real grasp on, why America is in Afghanistan and what, but I mean, to me, that's just basic fucking communication 101, but especially for high level elite tiered warfighters, like understanding why we're here, what we're trying to accomplish, 30,000 foot view and all the way down to the micro. Yeah. Why wouldn't you want them to know that? So I'm curious, one, what your take is on that. I mean, not all of them. Some of them our leaders were fucking great about it and we knew exactly why we were there and what we were doing. But a lot of them, that wasn't the case. I'm curious about the disparity. And I'm also curious how you as a leader navigated the risk mitigation, because that's always a tough one. That if I've never been in your shoes, I don't want to Monday morning quarterback it, but I can certainly imagine the kind of dichotomy that exists internally of trying to decide how much we're going to push it and how worth it is this amount of risk based on what we're trying to accomplish. Like how do you fucking rationalize all that?
Yeah, the dichotomy that you talked about, first of all, in like understanding the mission set at the tactical level, I think that actually went all the way up to the most senior levels. That was one of the things that I was able to do, where like looking at the guests that you've had on here, I mean, just serious gunslingers and trigger pullers. And, I will tell you, my experience was nowhere near to that degree. Those guys were in the mix far more than I was. What I found myself able to do was run the seams quite a bit. One minute I could be out in a village working with a couple of ODAs here, and then the next minute I'd be up in Kabul meeting with the Ministry of Water, and talking about hot water tables and why they're not out. And in doing that, I got to get kind of a sense of where things were at various levels of war. And one of the things that fascinated me was if you took, I think at any command level, and you took like the top 5 officers and put them in 5 different rooms and asked them why they were there, they'd all tell you something different.
Yeah.
So I think there was an inconsistency. And really, if you go back and I talk about this in my book, Game Changers, like I don't think there was ever clarity of mission, even when it was given like at the national command level.
Yeah.
I don't think it was clear. When you have one commander in chief saying, we're not nation building, right? But then at the same time, you're fucking nation building, Yeah. So by the time it got down to the ODA SEAL platoon level, I mean, what was clear, at least early on, was that you had this big old thing called a Joint Special Operations Area, a JSOA. And there were no other troops around. And you had you and your boys, and you could go to town. You could walk the enemy down, and you could get after it. And they did. And there was, I think, clarity in that regard. There were other teams who, either culturally or just because it was their belief system, thought much more by, with, and through. Like, we're going to build capacity here. We're going to work with the commandos. And so you just had this mix. You had this cultural, even within SF, it was a house divided on where we came down. Are we here to walk the enemy down, or are we here to build capacity with the commandos and the Afghan Special Forces so that they can do it? And I don't know that we ever, as an entity, ever got fully clear on that, because there were so many confusing signals, and it was such an ambiguous environment. The closest I saw it in my time there, it was on the 3rd rotation in 2010, when we were doing that bottom-up village stability mission. And that included SEAL platoons, it included MARSOC, SF, but you were working with these indigenous tribes in these communities, and you had Afghan Special Forces there with you at your shoulder, also advising. And it was pretty clear, like it was effective. I mean, it was really taking back a lot of ground. And honestly, it was the only time I ever saw us kind of in tune with how Afghanistan really works.
Yeah.
Which is the villages and the communities run shit when you get off the pavement.
Yeah.
The government doesn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
And so you saw these communities kind of reclaiming their autonomy and pushing the Taliban out on their own because they didn't want them there.
Yeah.
They didn't want us there either.
Yeah.
But there was a level of agency that started to emanate from that for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, man, we pulled the rug on it, pulled our teams out, and left these guys to fend for themselves and be hunted down for retribution.
Yeah. Did you, I guess for where you were at too, as a fairly senior officer, did you get a sense of your higher ups pulling you in and being like, "Hey, here's the fucking deal"? Like, did you feel times that you were in the same boat as some of the sled dogs?
I mean, I think all of us were a bit deluded, to be honest with you. I think we all told ourselves some shit about what was going on there at an officer level that I know I need to take personal responsibility for the rest of my life. For example, thinking in any capacity that the Taliban were fractured and reporting that back, and we did. Like it was as organizations were coming back saying, yeah, we've almost got them. They're fractured. And they weren't fucking fractured. There were more of them in the rural areas than when we started, and I think that there was, I don't know, man.
I mean, do you feel like you were lying to yourself, or do you feel like you were just disillusioned?
I think you just wanted to win. Yeah. You just wanted it. You wanted it to count. I think what for me was towards the end of my time was getting real honest and saying, look, man, this shit's going to take 50 to 75 years. Mm-hmm. We've been doing FID in Colombia since the 50s, right? We've been doing FID in the Philippines forever. We're going to have to do long-term remote area FID in this country with irregulars and regulars for the rest of our life. Yeah. And that's what it's going to be. Now, the question is that expenditure of a small footprint of specialized special operators over the long term worth the creation of antibodies to violent extremism in undergoverned areas? And I think it is. So for me, but we started too late. Like we early in the war, it was all about attrition, walking them down, and I think we burned 10 years doing that.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, and I also agree that I think that it's worth it, especially when you look at where we're at now. Not that I don't think anybody who has ever fired a fucking bullet in anger, for on behalf of the United States military in the last 20 years wouldn't have predicted the nightmare monstrosity that took place.
True.
Having said that, it's easy to say that now. Well, fuck, I mean, all of us were saying that beforehand. But I agree. I think that super small footprint is the key. I mean, for that matter, if you look at Afghanistan a month before we pulled out, there was a fucking 2,500 troops there. Yeah. I mean, there's fucking nobody there, basically. Right. But the Taliban, what didn't they do? Well, they didn't fuck with us because they knew if they did, what would happen. Yeah. And then we went and completely erased all of it and fucked over the entire country in the process.
We sure did. And I think that, when you look at the origins, if you walk it back to 9/11 and you look at the fact that bin Laden and his cronies, we knew they were up to something. We tried that over the horizon shit. It didn't work. And we ended up sucking the worst terror attack in American history out of that very safe haven. Out of those ashes, we made the realization, hey, we did not have a good ground intelligence capability. And we did not have a sufficient partner force that we were working with that could have been an antibody to this thing, right? Yeah. And we had the Northern Alliance. I mean, Massoud was telling us, they're coming. They're going. He said it in France right before it happened. They're going to hit you. Yeah. And we wouldn't listen to the guy. And then after it all happened, we saddle up, we go over there, we spend 20 years building a ground intelligence capability and a partner force in the Afghan Special Operations Forces in particular that was damn good. Yeah. They were doing 95% of the fighting. They lost as many as 70,000 in the overall ANA, KIA, 150,000 wounded. I mean, they lost a lot. And the point is, we were building a capacity, I believe, that with a residual counterterror force in place, could have held the line for long-term foreign internal defense to keep building that capacity. And again, if you look at it now where we are, I just interviewed Massoud's son, Ahmed Massoud, who's the leader of the National Resistance Front. And, he was telling me, he said, there are, by his count, 27 violent extremists in Afghanistan right now including ISIS-K and Al-Qaeda.
Oh, actual entities.
Actual entities operating with complete impunity on the very A&A bases in Helmand and Kandahar, where we had our bases. They're operating there. Osama bin Laden's son has been spotted back in the country. Zawahiri's son-in-law is back in the country. And you're like, okay, wonder why they're there, And I believe that the dashboard is blinking red again in a pre-9/11 kind of way. We have no ground intel capability, and we have no partner force because we left them fucking behind. Like we literally, we had a partner force that was so proficient, and we literally just left those guys, and now they're over there. And whatever comes here, I think it was the CENTCOM commander just the other day said 6 months from striking the U.S., we're going to find ourselves probably saddling our kids up this time on C-17s and doing the same shit again.
Yeah. And billions of dollars of equipment and a lot of training also that now we're up against.
Yeah, I mean, some of these guys have been co-opted. I mean, there's accurate reporting that the Iranians have actually co-opted some commandos by holding their families hostage in Iran, and those commandos are now fighting in Ukraine for the Russians, for the Wagner Group, against NATO forces, basically.
Yeah. If we could, that second question, which is risk mitigation.
Yeah. Sorry.
No. I mean, that was great points, and I'm glad that you went into it. To me, that's one thing that I hear a lot.
Yeah.
You've got such a disparity in experience from guy to guy. Some of it's luck, most of it's luck. But some guys have these wet dream deployments where their task unit commander or whoever was calling the shots was basically like, go fuck them up, boys. I'll be in the jock. Let me know if you need anything, And then there's other guys that just hamstring the fuck out of them. And then, of course, there's, everything in between. But putting myself in those shoes, I can see the difficulty in just being like, hey, you're here to do a job. Go fucking do it. On the same token, it's like you've got these, early 20s testosterone-filled, for lack of a better term, fucking meatheads in some cases that want nothing more than to just dive headfirst into whatever the fuck, hornet's nest that they can kick over.
Yeah.
And will bitch about, not being able to do their job, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm curious, like from a commander's intent standpoint, how do you navigate that?
From a leadership perspective, I kind of unpack it a couple of ways. One is I can't help but start with, like, at a personal level is, having to look a wife in the eyes or a mom in the eyes and, try to give them some kind of peace on why their son died or why their husband died. There's always the knowledge that you're going to have to do that. And not only are you going to have to do it once, you're going to be responsible to some degree for that individual and their family for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. And that always weighs on you, right? At a personal level, is because these people are your friends too. Like you grew up with them, and there's a deep, deep bond. And so keeping them alive, first and foremost, and if there is going to be loss, it needs to fucking matter.
Yeah.
I can remember one situation where a very, very prominent politician who Green Beret got himself into a jam, and the mission that he was on though, and they were really pinned down and they were gunning it up, man. But the mission they were on was to find a new airfield for their UAE partners, and it's like, bro, you are aborted. Like, get the fuck out of there. There was no utility in it.
Yeah.
And so that was my only problem with just like turning it loose, is because if you want to find a gunfight in Afghanistan or Iraq, you're going to find a gunfight.
Yeah.
But our special operations criteria, the way that special forces in particular, which is what I understand how they're supposed to deploy and employ their usage, is really by, with, and through indigenous partners. It is to build capacity, and so where I would typically assume more risk is when it involved building capacity with the commandos or a new unit, or putting a unit into a position of influence that they didn't have before, or putting in a new capability with the HF radio that they haven't used before and taking some risk there, assuming some risk there with the Taliban massing on you, taking. So for me, the way I always tried to look at it was, what is the strategic outcome here? If we're going to go in here and and get after it and put our guys at risk and possibly some of them not come home or come home maimed. What are we doing that's different than a fucking infantry squad?
Yeah.
Or or a direct action hit. Now, if it's DA, fine.
Yeah.
If that's what you're there to do. But in most cases, that's not what we were there to do. We were, DA was a mission, but the bulk of our work was foreign internal defense. It was to build capacity.
Yeah.
And so typically I would try to look at risk that way. Mm-hmm. And if I was going to go out on the limb and assume risk, it was usually in that realm where there would be a lingering capacity as a result of it.
Yeah. Is it a fair assumption or fair to say that you could kind of boil it down to one simple statement, which is if I'm having to explain to a loved one why your son is now dead, it's because he did this, and because of that, we accomplished this, and it's a big fucking deal. And if you can say yes to that.
Yeah, the why matters.
Yeah.
The why needs to matter, not just the task.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I think that's phenomenal to hear, and I wish more officers kind of lived that way, because it seems like some of them are so gun shy, like that they won't let their guys do any fucking thing because they don't want to have to say, we lost this number of guys on my watch, blah, blah, blah. Then you've got, some others that are just like, yep, fucking take the gloves off and go do whatever the fuck you want to do. And while I can appreciate the brazenness in that, and I think that there is something to be said for that. I don't say that mockingly. I truly, like, if I had to pick one over the other, it's give me the guy with the gloves off and let us decide what's too fucking dicey or not, because we're the ones doing it. Like, I'd rather have that scenario than, somebody trying to shackle you back. But I also, as I get older, realize that, when your prefrontal cortex isn't even fucking developed yet. I mean, that's the age I was when I was first in Iraq. It's probably better to have a little senior guy that's looking at it from maybe a little bit different perspective. That's calling some of the shots. It just needs to be balanced.
I agree. The other thing I tried to do too is I've always been just really blessed to have, kind of sage NCOs at my shoulder who would advise me, on, from the ground level on the approaches to take. I always found that there were very few situations where you couldn't reach out, to a couple of senior non-commissioned officers and say, hey, what do you guys think?
Yeah.
How do you think we should play this? And, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be spot on, man. They're going to tell you exactly how to play it.
Yeah.
And then, this goes back to what my mentor, Mark, taught me. Then you got to fucking take care of them.
Yeah.
You got to make sure they have the medevac. You got to make sure they have the operational fires, that the aerial resupply is going to be on time, and all that shit that no one wants to do.
Yeah.
So that they have the absolute best chance of success because they just told you how to win it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is taking that counsel, giving them what they need, and get out of their way.
Yeah.
That was the other piece of it that I found. Man, I can't think of a single situation in combat where an NCO didn't square me the fuck away before execution of a mission.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's fucking awesome not to hear you just say that, but also that you listen to them as much as you did, because there's guys that don't. Yeah. Did you have any calls that you made that you wish you could take back, or ones that went fucking horribly wrong?
Yeah, I do. A lot of my time was spent in the operation centers. When our teams would get into fights and duress, and it's kind of like Houston with NASA, like you gotta bring them home, and typically you're 5 steps behind when that happens. When somebody calls troops in contact 3 times, like, you're already behind and somebody's hurt or dead. And every single one of those calls, because typically it was somebody very well, their kids, you've been over there for birthday parties, and you can hear it in their voice, and they're needing extraction or they're needing fires. And there were times when we weren't fast enough. There were times when we didn't get it there as efficiently as we could have. There were times as a task force commander when we dropped ordnance, and the people that were killed were the people that never should have been killed. And I don't have regrets for men that were killed as combatants in terms of belligerence. Like, I don't that doesn't really haunt me. What does haunt me is buddies who didn't make it out of there where I feel like I could have been faster or I could have been better for them.
Do you feel like in those instances that they were misjudgments, or it was just an inability to be able to do what you were trying to accomplish fast enough?
I don't feel like there were any, as I look back on it, because I've done it a lot as I get older. I don't feel like there were like grievous errors, or omissions, and I would say it. But where, if you had anticipated a little bit more, right? That maybe you could have got that airframe there before he bled out, right? And,
I mean, that's easy to fucking hindsight, though, I mean, to me, like, there's plenty of calls I've made in my life that if I think like, I could have done that better, but I also know that I did the best I could with the information I had at the time, you know, and I think that's the big difference. You know, if you do something out of cowardice or out of malintent, something of that nature, then that's very different. But, to me, that's my take on it, I guess. I mean, were there ever any calls that you made where, when you talk about the level of utility, where you felt like that was mismatched in terms of damage, collateral damage done, or, effective damage done within a unit where it wasn't worth what you got out of the mission for?
I think there were times one that I always look back at is like whenever we would, for example, the Nam Dong mission I was talking about, where we did the maneuver, the ANA maneuver up in the Aruzgan province. It was a pretty large mission. And it was an SF captain and myself that nominated that mission. And we saw it as a way to get into some territory, some sanctuary that we had never been before with the Afghan forces. And so it represented a real strategic gain, in terms of battlefield disposition. And so we nominated that whole thing. We nominated that whole target. We were allocated howitzers and Chinooks. I mean, we had a friggin' armada for this task force for a sustained 12-day operation, massing against the Taliban massing on us. And but what I remember is that we had one team that was a contingency or a crisis response element, a CRE, and we would put them on anytime we would get a hit on mid-level leaders. We'd put those guys on them and chase them down. And the thing I remember about that is putting that team on these three brothers that were some pretty bad actors that had killed Marines a couple of weeks prior. And we knew that the team was going to be flying into a buzzsaw, but what I always remember is looking at the team, and Alan Johnson in particular, who was killed, and just this big shit-eating grin on his face. That was the last memory I have of him, and the fact that these operators, these magnificent warriors, would go into that fray with just because you asked them to do it. And you know what I mean? And with just complete exuberance and a can-do attitude. In some ways that haunts me, because I can still see that. As far as the overmatch, man, we overmatched everything. Anytime we got in a fight and we brought close air support in, you bring in an A-10 in an insurgency, you're overmatching. Yeah. And there's no way that you're going to have surgical lethality when you've got fire coming from a mosque or something like that, or an urban area. You're going to kill some people that shouldn't be killed. They probably weren't supposed to be there, or they, just because of the profile of that weapon system, right? And it's as surgical as you can make it, and it's as reduced as you can make it. Cool. Now you just live with it for the rest of your life, because that's the reality. Yeah.
I want to take a second to talk about something near and dear to my heart, and that is a staunch supporter of this podcast, which is Bub's Naturals. The hat sitting in front of me here on our coffee table here in the studio belonged to Glenn Doherty. His nickname was Bub. I did 2 platoons with him, and his childhood best friend and another colleague of theirs, Sean is the best friend, TJ is their colleague, started Bub's Naturals, which is a collagen and MCT oil company in Bub's or Glenn's honor. And, for me, it's an absolute honor to be sponsored by and working with a company that was started in the honor of one of my closest friends and a guy that I went to war with. And, the Bubs brand is not only super quality, collagen powder as well as MCT oil powder, but they also give back to the Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation. They donate proceeds from their product sales to the Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation, which, to me just furthers, the mission set on Veterans Day. They give 100% back. So I do believe it's the best collagen on the planet. I like to mix it in with morning coffee. The MCT oil powder, the same thing. It mixes in very easy. It tastes great. And it just kind of adds everything that you want to start your day off from a brain health standpoint, from joint support, gut support. MCT oil and collagen are two components, especially as we age, that are integral components to health. And so to be able to work with Bubs Naturals and be able to work with them and sponsor a product that, number one, is a high quality product, and number two is so near and dear to my heart and to the Mic Drop podcast for who it was started for and what it stands for. It's just it's an amazing place to be. So it is Whole30 approved. It's sports certified, so you're not going to run into any problems with that. And I will say that right now they're offering 20% 20% off if you go to bubsnaturals.com and use the Mic Drop code. So I really highly encourage you to try it out, incorporate it into your day-to-day for joint health, for brain health, for cognition, for gut health, and to support an amazing organization that does a lot of things in Glenn Bubs' honor. So go to bubsnaturals.com. Mic Drop is the code, 20% off. All right, guys, as you know, I'm into health and fitness and specifically how nutrition relates to it. Coffee has been a staple of mine and I think most people's for a long time. As you know, I'm a big proponent of Mudwater, which is a sponsor of this show. They have been for a while now, and we have a great partnership. I love their product. It's a phenomenal alternative to coffee. For me, coffee, there's jitters, there's mold in it. A lot of times it tends to kind of upset my stomach. But Mudwater has adaptogenic mushrooms. There's a fraction of the caffeine that coffee has. There's a little bit, but it's very, very little. And it really leans on mushrooms and the blend of matcha and chai for kind of that sustained energy that continues to go and doesn't crash the way coffee does when it runs out. They use lion's mane for alertness, cordyceps to support physical performance, chaga and reishi to support the immune system, turmeric for soreness, and cinnamon for antioxidants. I really enjoy that first cup of warm liquid in the morning by taking Mudwater instead of coffee, and I'll put just a splash of heavy cream or even some protein powder, some collagen powder, and I also throw usually a couple drops of stevia or monk fruit vanilla to make it kind of a thick, normal morning coffee ritual type of concoction. And I got to tell you, it does wonders for me, and I'm really, really glad that I switched. It's been, a better part of a year now, that I've been taking that and using that as part of my daily morning routine, and it's fantastic. I love it. I can't recommend it enough. It's 100% USDA, organic, non-GMO, gluten-free, vegan, and kosher certified, and they also donate to the Berkeley Center for Science of Psychedelics, which is groundbreaking and leading research to help veterans with PTSD and other associated illnesses and syndromes. So great cause, great company, phenomenal product. If you go to Mudwater, that's mudwtr.com/Mike to support this show and the product, and use the code MikeMud, MIKEMUD, all caps, for 15% off. That's, again, Mudwater, mudwtr.com/Mike, and the code is MikeMud, MIKEMUD, all caps, for 15% off. Go check them out. Well, I think one distinction that should be made, especially from somebody sitting in your shoes or anybody that's making that call, whether it's you or anybody in that chain of command, is the people that are firing at you from that position. It's not like they don't know that that's the probability.
100%.
So, to me, like, you've got to put the onus on the individual that's putting them in that position because they know they're doing it. Like, you can't tell me that, like, there's a reason you're shooting at us from a mosque. It's because we're not supposed to shoot it. So if you walk in there and you see 30 fucking innocent civilians praying and doing, going about their business, women and children, and you decide to pull the trigger at American forces from there, you're the motherfucker that's putting them in that danger.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
Not that it doesn't still suck.
Yeah.
But
yeah. And it's for me, and so many of my peers saw 10x more combat than I did. But for me, the combat I did see, it's shades of things. It's not like a black and white thing. It's shades of things, and even the ones that are so cut and dry, they still stay with you.
I can imagine. Yeah. I fortunately was never in a super gray area position that way. Every time we engaged anything or anybody, it was pretty fucking clear cut.
Yeah.
But I am curious, if I may, can I ask how many men were lost under your command?
I was always, when I was task force commander of Nam Dong, we lost one U.S. service member. And then we lost, I want to say we lost 4 Afghan soldiers on that one. And then we had 10 or 12 wounded on that mission. The rest of my, I didn't lose anybody else under doing task force stuff, but then the rest of my tours were as an operations officer. Yeah. And not in command.
Okay.
Right. So we lost, I think 7 on my first rotation in that battalion. Next rotation, I think we lost 5. And then in my final rotation in 2010, doing the village stability mission, 6 or 7 guys.
Yeah. Wow. Those are pretty big numbers for those units, but, so as an operations officer, what, I guess at what level did you have involvement in dealing with any of that?
Putting them into the fight, and everything from their plan, their con op, everything they're going to do, from the moment that they get assigned that mission, you're right there with them, resourcing them, putting that together. And then once they go in, man, like you're their lifeline, that's it. You're their lifeline. Everything that is going to happen to them external to their mission is coming from you. And so knowing how they think, what's going on, spending a lot of time with the commander, with the maneuver commander, and with the senior NCO, going through all of their contingencies, talking so that you, as fast as you can anticipate what they're going to call for, what they're going to need. And, and because seconds are everything, as and a lot of it is battle tracking the shit out of them as they're moving, and then getting them out of there when it's time to extract. And the thing is, you've got, at any given time, it's not uncommon if you're running an operations center like that, you've got 15, 20 maneuver elements all out at the same time, and as many as 3 or 4 of them in contact all the time. So you're constantly managing contact all the time.
Which means you're constantly managing resources.
Absolutely.
That can help them all the time. And you've got almost ER doctor triage.
Yeah. And you may have, like for example, you may have one jet on the deck, and a B-52 inbound that's still 20 minutes out. You have 3 teams in contact, and you're trying to figure out who gets the fighter jet.
Yeah.
You got to sort that. You literally have to figure out who's in the worst spot.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
Were there ever operations that you gave the go-ahead on that you felt like that it was a mistake to authorize? I know it's easy to be like, well, any of the ones that guys were killed on, but again, speaking to the utility component, like were any of them like, fuck, that just, what a waste, because in some in some instances, or I would say in retrospect to a certain degree across the board, it kind of feels that way given how we left and where it's at now. It's hard not to paint the entire fucking thing with a brush of what was the fucking point. But I guess, if you individualize the, risk versus reward versus what was gained by what was lost, it's kind of a fucking word soup.
No, it's not. And what I'd like to do is maybe answer your question from the perspective of going back from my 3rd tour. in the first 2 tours, whenever we launched missions, whenever we would bring surgical precision fires in a range of ways and do a lot of damage and a lot of body count, a lot of KIAs, a lot of successful missions. And I never really thought about that deeply until around 2009 when we saw that there were more Taliban in the rural areas than when we started in 2002. Mm-hmm. Right? And so you start going, well, wait a minute, you know, from a basic metric of a rural insurgency, that shit's not good.
Yeah.
You know, so that was one, so where I started to question myself in terms of, okay, what are we doing? If this is what we've been doing for 10 years, you know, gloves off, and God knows we have killed a lot of these dudes, and there's more of them in the rural areas than when we started.
What's the ROI?
What's the return on investment here? And then once we started doing village stability in 2010, and I had the ability to travel around the countryside and really get back to kind of old school Green Beret shit, sitting with elders, having conversations under mulberry trees about the war over the last 10 years, their exposure to war over the last 40 years, you know, going all the way back to the Soviets. And I started to pick up on the level of impact that our counterinsurgency campaign had on their civil society and their ability to just operate day to day. It was like, damn, you know, we have brought something into this thing that, like, I don't think we're going to recover from. Yeah. You know, we have pushed the population so far away from us. Mm-hmm. Granted, we won a lot of battles, and, you know, we brought overwhelming combat power to bear. But I'm sitting here talking to this old man who lost his nephew in a bombing raid, who had, according to him, nothing to do with it, and he's never going to fucking work with us.
Yeah.
You know, so as an SF guy, you're going, all right, well, I'm not sure this is working, you know, and I'm not sure that the applications that I certainly stood in that talk and said, yep, do it, brought the results that I'd hoped they would.
Yeah.
Hard to say. It's hard for me to say that, but it's true.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, you know, people may argue or say that by saying that or even admitting to thinking that is that you do a disservice to the fallen. And I look at it the opposite. I think by being honest with ourselves and taking accountability for it is the best thing you can do.
100%. And I think that a lot of the guys that I worked with and some who fell were very adamant about the same thing. They were saying the same things. Yeah. They were still doing their jobs and they would roll out and do, but they, you know, these were guys that saw a lot of, had done a lot of foreign internal defense around the world, and they knew, and they were smart guys. And the other thing too is I think that we did, as a community, Special Forces did look around in 2009 and say, this isn't working. We need to reboot here, and we did. And village stability operations was that, and it, you know, and it had a pretty prolific effect. And then once again, you had policymakers come in and pull the rug on that thing.
Yeah. After
we had made promises to villagers that we were going to stay with them as long as it took.
Yeah.
You know, and for me, that was the last straw. That was when I hung it up. So, yeah, it's hard to say, but I think as a community, we did learn in that moment, tried to adjust, and just weren't able to pull it off.
Yeah. Did you notice a disparity between administrations having deployed under two different ones and pretty opposing spectrums of the political spectrum? I feel like Austin Powers. Let me allow myself to introduce myself. Did you find that there was a big contrast between deploying under Bush and deploying under Obama in terms of everything? I mean, morale, support.
Yeah, I found that under President Bush, there seemed to be more, at least perceived, support from the administration. And maybe that is also because we were fresh off the attacks of 9/11 and that kind of thing. But it did feel like, at least in our circles, as we talked about things, that there was a level of kind of respect that went deeper. And then you started to see some absence of that, I think, under the Obama administration. But look, my sense of it is that I found all of the administrations, the two that I served under, and then just staying connected to the Afghan fight beyond that, all of them remarkably underwhelming.
Yeah.
And really not up to the task of leading a national effort to deal with Afghanistan in a way that you had a whole of government approach and clarity of orders and what we were there to do. Yeah. You know, I didn't see any administration, frankly, that should be thumping their chest right now.
Yeah. So I'd like to get into that a little bit as you got out and still stayed pretty connected with guys that you served with and in the community as a whole. Walk me through your, I guess, path as you witnessed the things that have gone on. And I'm curious about all of it, not just the Afghanistan piece and kind of that fumbling of it, but also some of the social stuff that has crept into our military with the COVID vaccine stuff, the open transgender stuff within the military, women serving in certain capacities that they haven't been able to, things of that nature that seem to be pretty divisive within military groups. I'm curious to get your take on all that.
Yeah, I got out in 2013, and I'll start by saying that I was retiring on my terms. I felt good about it. Still married, 3 kids, living at home. Had a contract job, coming out. Was going to write a book, so everything was set pretty well. But I will tell you, my transition itself was terrible. It was awful. Within 6-7 months of getting out, I had just spiraled. Everything was okay on the outside, making good money and stuff, but I just had lost purpose, lost identity. I felt like I was like floating 4 feet off the earth all the time, just untethered, you know? And fell into a really, really dark place, a level of, and I'd never really experienced anything like that when I was on active duty.
Yeah.
That
was your whole identity, right?
Yeah.
I mean, from the time you were,
it was,
even before you were on active duty, that's what you wanted to be.
All I wanted to be. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're not, and I, went into a level of depression is the only way I know to describe it. And I just let myself go. I mean, my kids would, I got to be such a dick that like my kids, if I would walk in a room, they would just get up and leave because they didn't know what version of dad they were going to get, but they were pretty sure it wasn't going to be one they wanted.
Yeah.
My wife and I were just falling apart. And I started having suicidal ideations. I mean, in a major way, to the point that I was putting the pistol in my hand.
Yeah.
And this was within, all of this within 18 months of getting out.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out what the hell am I doing? Like what now? I'm 41. Like, is this it? Is this my life? Like, is it over? And I just felt like an old piece of kit, man, and just no sense of purpose or direction. And so what was happening around me as I looked at the military and everything else, I didn't even know where I stood in relation to it. And so I kind of checked out from all of that. And I'll bring it back to your question, though, is that what brought me back to it was actually connecting with a couple of civilian mentors. I knew that if I was going to survive, that I had to find a way to reconnect with my voice, and there was something I felt like I needed to do to share with the world, but I just didn't know what it was. And I found a couple of mentors. One of them was a retired football player, Bo Eason, NFL player. Dude blew his knee out like 7 times, and on the 7th time, decided that if he didn't take the TNT inside of him and do something positive, he was going to go to prison. So he became an actor, and then he became a playwright, and then he became a speaker. And I was going around to all these conferences trying to figure out what the fuck am I going to do. And I see this guy speak, and as soon as he was like prowling the stage, and I thought, man, that is so badass. I felt like that day I saw Mark.
Yeah.
And I went up to him and started talking to him, and he agreed to work with me. And so for several years, I worked with him around storytelling, primarily just as a way to heal myself and using narrative therapy, and it was really helpful. And so I started doing that work with other veterans and other guys on active duty. We started a nonprofit called The Hero's Journey, my wife and I. And that's how I got back into the military again, was actually working along restoration lines, healing through storytelling. And in doing that, I started to get a sense of what the guys were going through with all of these different programs. And, the one thing that I could just say, I was so glad all that shit happened after I was out.
Yeah.
But I did see a precipitous drop in morale as all of that kind of social programming started to take root. But what really worried me more than anything, and still does, was the level of just mental health challenges that our guys, high performers, were going through. I mean, no one even, my wife didn't even know until just 2 years ago that I'd gone through what I went through. And you know, you're losing so many friends so fast to suicide and alcoholism. It's like, what the fuck is happening? Yeah. And you know, so for me, it was more around getting connected back to veteran mental health.
Yeah.
And seeing the impact of a 20-year war on our society, on those guys.
You have 3 sons.
I do.
How old were they when you got out?
Let's see. Cody was in high school. Cooper was in middle school, and Braden was in his last year of elementary school.
So pretty formative years. How is your relationship with them now after having gone through that with them?
It's really good. I mean, Cody, there was a very, very low period. When Cody told me he was joining the Army, that was kind of a blow initially. I didn't know what to do with it. But you know, he's loving it and he's really doing great. And I couldn't be prouder. But my relationship with all 3 of my boys is really strong. And in fact, my middle son is in the play with me.
Oh, nice.
You know, and so we're empty nesters now. Monty and I are empty nesters, and you know, I get to chase her around the house, and you know, still we travel.
Do you ever catch her?
You know, occasionally.
Once in a while.
Yeah, I think she just throws me a bone and lets me catch her.
Yeah,
but the relationship's great, and they're grown now, chasing their dreams.
Yeah.
And what an amazing thing to see your kids chase their dreams, man.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Yeah. How did you get through to go from you entering a room and them just being like, fuck that, to where you have a great relationship?
You know, it was incremental, obviously, and it took some time, but I had to find my voice again. And by that, I mean my point of view, my agency, my purpose. I had to get back connected to that. It was just such a it was like I was disembodied. And again, for me, it was in developing my story, my story about my life, my journey, my struggle, and sharing that story with them, and getting a sense of myself again and what my purpose was, where I stood in the world. Once I started to kind of reclaim that, and I started to see that I was relevant, that's when I started to show back up.
Yeah.
You know, as dad, as a husband, because I just could not find my way to relevance. I could not see what relevance looked like for me.
Yeah.
You know, after doing what I'd done in special forces, I mean, how the hell do you even replicate that in civil society? Yeah. At least I couldn't find a way that filled my cup.
Yeah, I think that's the case with most veterans, especially special operations guys, because you go through this, you know, journey of self-identification that embodies the career, the job, and there's such a mystique and mythical, like, legend status that's associated with special operators, you know, and let's be honest, like, you know, when you're in uniform and pick one, you know, fucking Green Beret, Ranger, SEAL, whatever, and you go to any military base, like it's on the same level of rarity as NFL players or rock stars, and you get treated that way, you know, and so to go from where not just in a society that puts warriors on a pedestal, but now you're on a pedestal within that pedestal, and you go from that to basically fucking nobody, you know, and in some cases, you know, yours 23 fucking years of being the man to being like, who the fuck are you?
Exactly.
You know, but I think that's the case with all guys, and it's going to vary a little bit depending on how long you did it, what you did, and now what you're doing. And that's something that I talk with a lot of guys about is, you know, to your point, and I couldn't agree more, is purpose.
Yeah.
You know, like if you don't have that, and it doesn't matter what it is, you know, but if you don't have that, that's how you're going to feel. You know?
You're right. You're right, man.
And it's crucial.
You know, there's a lot of good science out there nowadays that the ability to measure brain activity and derive certain things from it in terms of purpose, human connection. But, you know, one of the things that we know is that humans, more than any other critter, are meaning-seeking and meaning-assigning. We assign meaning to everything we do, you know. and it literally it figures into every action we take. At a semi-conscious level, we're constantly assigning and seeking and assigning meaning to everything. And then all of a sudden, if you can't make meaning out of a lived experience, you're in trouble. Yeah. Like you're in trouble at a biological level. And then you add to it the guilt, the TBIs, the PTS, the various, corrosive elements of just combat.
And throw some booze and pain pills on
top
of it.
You got it. It's a devil's cocktail. Yeah. And that's what I think we're up against right now. I think that we're on the front end of something that is frankly more diabolical than it has been at any point in modern history. And nobody's coming. Like we're gonna have to step into this ourselves with our brothers and sisters and figure this one out, I think.
Yeah. So I started dipping when I was in high school. I started with pouches, as most kids do. Ultimately in the military, I dipped the entire time I was there. A lot of us did. One of the things about dipping is that it kind of turns into a ritual where, it's really part of the culture almost, oftentimes in the military and in a lot of fields that are that way. And one of the things, obviously, real tobacco isn't the best for you, but because of that ritual being such an ingrained part of that culture, it's something that a lot of times we miss. And even when I got out of the Navy, I still dipped for a number of years. I wish that I had this product, Black Buffalo. It's a tobacco-free alternative that I can tell you it looks, smells, tastes, feels everything like the real thing, but there is no tobacco in it. And it's a phenomenal product. They have mint, wintergreen, blood orange, straight peach. What's cool is they've got the straight as far as the cut. They've got long cut. They've got pouches. So it's really kind of a one-stop shop for tobacco-free alternatives that way. But they also have a zero version, which has absolutely no nicotine. So you can get it with nicotine if you want the nicotine, or you can get it without nicotine if you don't. It's all food-grade ingredients, green cabbage essentially, as well as pharmaceutical-grade nicotine if that's the option that you choose. But it's just an awesome company. It's veteran-started. And they're big supporters of the Mic Drop podcast. And it's a product that I stand behind and absolutely endorse. It's a great crew of guys. What's really cool about Black Buffalo is it's it's the look, the feel, the smell, the taste, the texture, everything the same as regular dip. And to me, that's the big thing missing from all and any other alternatives, the little pouches of nicotine or any of the other stuff that doesn't use a product that really has that same feel. It doesn't feel like you're actually dipping it. So Black Buffalo has done a masterful job at creating that same experience. The flavors are all on point. The long cut and the pouches are both just like the real thing. And again, the fact that you can get it with nicotine if you want, or you can get it completely nicotine free if you want. So again, if you're 21 years or older and you dip and you want that tobacco-free alternative, go to blackbuffalo.com and the code is MicDrop for 20% off.
So safe to say politics or politically in the military, the COVID vaccine stuff, the transgender stuff, the social experiment, you're not a fan of any of that?
I'm not. I don't think, I've never believed in social engineering in the military, particularly in the elite forces or combat arms. I'm not a fan of it. But, I have to say that having a son in the military and I try not to talk much about what he does, but out of respect for his work, but just having met a lot of his peers and how they think about it, a lot of them don't have, at least that I've met, don't have the level of issue with it that you and I do. So I try to just say, okay, I'm not in anymore. I'm not there. I don't have the context they have. So, maybe some of this stuff is not as bad, or I don't know. I just don't know, and I don't want to try to be that guy that talks about back when it was hard and shit. I try to just stay level about that, but it's hard for me because the bulk of what you just talked about, it just doesn't land with me. And I don't see it. I don't see it working in the kind of work that those units have to do.
Yeah. I agree completely with everything you just said. What I will say is that, time will tell. I mean, ultimately, I think to your point, both of us, neither of us are in.
Yeah.
Neither of us have any say other than our fucking opinion, which doesn't mean much at this point,
right.
other than to, the people listening. But what I will say is that, time will tell in terms of, and what I will say is that, like, obviously I'm not the policymaker. I don't drive the decision, but I'm curious to see in a few years how effective as a warfighting force we're going to be, where that is the priority.
And that's the ultimate ROI, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's how you do.
That's the litmus,
For sure.
So
that's the ultimate metric. And the sad part about that is that's a back end metric that you measure after the fact.
Yeah. And if it's wrong, then you're fucking too late.
Fucked. Yeah.
So, what I will say is that, like, if 10 years from now we can still go just hand anybody their fucking ass, I'll sit here and say, okay, you know what? I was wrong, or however you want to run it, fucking have at it. Because clearly you guys know better than me what the fuck you're doing.
100%. I've said that about even just straight up direct action in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. I'm like, if you can show me unequivocally that just turning the whole place into a parking lot, after attack like 9/11 is the better way to go, I'm all ears.
Yeah.
I'm all ears, but I don't necessarily see that. Like, I don't see the evidence to that.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, a lot of these experiments, the only way we're going to know, unfortunately, is as the smoke clears on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And then you're stuck with what you got.
Yeah. And to me, just from a society, if you look at it from a hierarchy standpoint or level of importance, it's like, why not try that in sports, in hobby groups, in things that don't fucking matter by comparison? Why don't you try it there first?
Right.
Sports being, sports and combatives, boxing, wrestling, MMA, fucking football, baseball, basketball, soccer. Why don't you mix that shit in there first?
Yeah.
Even the little bit that's been done has been pretty apparent what the disparity is.
Agreed. Yeah.
So to think that that's somehow magically not going to transfer over into when your fucking life is on the line, to me seems asinine. I mean, it seems bordering on fucking insane.
Yeah, especially if you don't have any skin in the game.
Yeah.
When you're doing that. And I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. I'm curious to get your thoughts on Ukraine.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody about that the other day. It's one of those, I never did any work. Did you ever do any work in Eastern Europe?
No.
Yeah, I didn't either. And so, once again, I always try to lead with that because I'm not as deep on it as a lot of, one of the things that astounds me, Mike, about this is the number of veterans who are involved in this shit.
Oh, I know it.
I think we are at a very, very weird place in national security. And I think it started with the collapse in Afghanistan where you had these veterans groups stand up. But when Ukraine popped off, you had groups stand up even faster because they were already kind of self-organized. Mm-hmm. But, you've got right now former special operators over in Ukraine doing FID.
Yeah.
And they are not part of the Department of Defense apparatus.
Yeah.
They are third parties out there doing that. So that's one thing that just right off the top of my head strikes me as really different, is that how we're approaching this as a nation, it is so disparate right now. I mean, we are definitely not unified in how we see the Ukraine problem. I don't think the administration is coherent in how they see it. I think, as I look at the problem, there's part of me that thinks, man, this is just straight up genocide and it needs to be dealt with. It's like a humanitarian disaster. This guy should not be allowed to get away with this. Plus, it puts all of Europe at risk. But then on the other hand, I'm thinking, fuck, we couldn't even properly exit a 20-year war. We're going to turn the page and start another one in Eastern Europe with a friggin' superpower?
Yeah, a nuclear superpower.
Yeah. And so I kind of struggle to frame it.
Yeah.
I really do. I struggle to kind of get moral clarity on it.
Yeah.
And I think it's because I'm still reeling from Afghanistan. Yeah. And I've even told buddies of mine who went right from the Afghan conflict into the Afghanistan or the Ukraine saying, hey, let's get some, I told them, I said, I don't think I can. I don't think I can even process this. I'm still trying to figure out how we left our commandos on the side of the road.
Yeah.
I just can't get my head around another war in Ukraine when we left this one so badly.
Yeah, and it's still a fucking mess. Like we haven't unfucked, the mess that is. No, I agree. I mean, to me, I think there's a few things to dissect there. There's two major components. One is the veteran population and the amount or volume that's involved, and I'll get into that second. To kind of the broader scope, the 30,000-foot view of what you were just talking about, I think the biggest trouble I have, and I think and where most people are scratching their heads on, not really sure what fucking side of the fence to fall on, is the lack of accountability and transparency as it relates to how much money is being sent there, where it's going, how it's being accounted for, i.e. it's not, not auditing it, not having any proof of what's happening with it when the state of affairs is such that it is in the United States. And when you combine that with a hyper-corrupt government there in existence now, and all of these different, very apparent and troubling, frankly, connections between our government and China and Ukraine, and frankly, fucking money laundering and the war machine effort, that the amount of money that's made off of what's being sent there and who's benefiting from it and all that stuff. It's really, really difficult to just blindly stand behind that cause and that flag when there's so many fucking things that are like, if it was a relationship, red flags flying up that you're like, wait, hey, hang on a second. Like that doesn't fucking pass the sniff test. Like, what's the fucking deal with, and there's 30 different things that you're like, hang on. Yeah. And nobody will give you a straight fucking answer.
You can't get a straight answer.
And it's the same standard, like, well, if you believe in like they make it and boil it or reduce it down to such a bumper sticker slogan, easily digestible fucking bullet point statement of, wave the flag, and if you're either fucking with us or you're a fucking Nazi, like, and it's just like, well, it's really not that fucking simple.
It's not, especially when you think about what we've been through for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like we haven't been exposed deeply to some version of this in Southwest Asia and in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And again, we pretty much gave our youth over to that.
Yeah.
Right. And now you're asking us to buy into something that I frankly don't understand it. Yeah. I don't feel I have a good picture of what's really happening at all.
Yeah.
It's filtered in so many different ways with so many different agendas that I can't truly, and I'm usually pretty good at making sense out of things. Yeah. I can't make sense out of it.
And to me, like, I'm not opposed at all to helping, but similarly to you, like, but not having no fucking clue as to how it's really working. Like, if you can make me understand, I'm going to be much more likely to either be behind it or against it. But when you play this fucking shell game, like, that inherently makes me suspicious of all of it. And to me, like, if I'm in your shoes, you meaning, the puppet masters that are sending money there, pulling the strings and making these high level decisions, if I'm you and I want my support, dude, I will do whatever the fuck it takes to make sure that you understand so that I have it.
Yeah.
Because by treating me like I'm 5 and it's, well, because I'm your parent and I fucking told you so, it's like, fooling me with Santa Claus. Like, I'm not buying it, and you're doing a less than piss poor job of helping anybody or making them understand what the fuck is really going on. So that's kind of the, the macro view. On the more micro side of why my theory as to, the veteran population and why it's so big, I really think, kind of going back to what we were talking about, that lack of purpose and kind of being in a fucking sailboat drifting at sea once you get out. I mean, you've got a generation of warfighters who have spent their entire adult lives fighting, and so now when that's gone, it's like, well, fuck me, now what?
What do I do?
But, and I don't mean this as a slight at all, so anybody listening that is in that position, I'm going to apologize in advance for the correlation I'm going to make, but I see a similar pattern in behavior of addicts in that, the adrenaline and the feeling and the rush and the sense of purpose and that euphoria, and there's plenty of science behind the dopamine and serotonin that's involved in the euphoria and the feelings that people get in these high rush environments, and they get essentially addicted to it, is that same pattern of behavior of abandoning everything that's worthwhile in your life to maintain something that's giving you that feeling. I mean, the same way meth or opioids or fucking alcohol or anything grabs you by the balls and will allow you and make you just shit can every fucking relationship you have in your life, everything good you have in your life, to be able to continue to feel that same way. And I think that there is a component of that exists in some of that. I could be totally fucking wrong, but to me, I don't, like, I'd love for somebody to say, no, you are totally fucking wrong, and here's why it's happening at this level. And if anybody's out there, feel free to post in the fucking YouTube comments to say, no, I think you're wrong, and here's why. I'm happy to listen, and if I'm wrong, I will be the first motherfucker to sit here and say, hey, I was wrong. Somebody opened my eyes, and it completely changed my perspective. But that's how I see it.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think all of us coming out of particularly the special ops world, I think first responders deal with some version of this, where it is such a radical. It's like changing planets.
Yeah.
And in many cases, the thought of going to that new planet, going to that new society, and trying to figure that shit out is scarier than any aspect of combat, and it's just so unknown, and frankly unattractive, in a lot of ways, and so I do think it certainly contributes to that. I also wonder, with the amount of, again, the Dunkirk-like volunteerism that is happening. I think we are rapidly approaching a point where this private-public partnership that has manifested over these last two conflicts, we're going to have to start talking about this. We're going to have to figure out how to do this, because there are a whole generation of special operators, for example, who are very capable and have relationships that are insane, and the ability to get shit done that on the private side is really impressive.
Yeah.
So I think there's some goodness in it, but right now, if you look at it, for the most part, the institutional leaders in our federal government, they dismiss out of hand the competency and capability of these veterans and what they're doing. And in some cases, it is on the edge.
Yeah.
And we've got to figure out like what it needs to look like.
Yeah.
But it's not going away.
No, it's not. And my advice to anybody out there that feels that way, and you see, loads of examples of combat veterans or just veterans in general, and that's, some of them are special operations, a lot of them, plenty of them are not. But to me, like there's a certain component of if you're in that kind of lane, nothing gives you more purpose than starting your own gig. And that's why I think you see so many veteran entrepreneurs that are just fucking crushing it.
Yep.
Because they've taken that purpose that they need to have, and they've dumped it into themselves. And I mean, that's what I did, and it's why, thankfully, gratefully, what have you, I never had a sliver of that transitional period that was dark for me, because I went right into going all the fuck in on myself.
Yeah.
But I believed in me. I believed in what I was doing, and I still do, and it's something that I'm passionate about. And I think, for anybody that's in that kind of sailboat scenario, is that you've got to find your why, and then just run it into the fucking ground with everything you have.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, it could be fucking crocheting doilies for fucking grandmother's couches if that's what floats your boat. But whatever it is, like, find that every morning when you get up, you're like, motherfucker, I get to do this today. And whatever that is, you go do it, and you blow it out of the fucking water.
And I think spending some time thinking about that before you get out, if you can, that's something that I wish I had done. And I think now that is one of the things that I'm seeing to some degree in the military. There are at least some programs that allow warfighters to actually start to do what you just said before they take that uniform off, whether that's interning somewhere, or just getting some time to dig into that. But I agree with you. I think that getting clear on your purpose, and for me, it was kind of a long thing. It wasn't epiphanal for me until I saw Bo speak, and then I thought, that's it, and I went all in for that. But just doing the movement and the reps to try to figure it out as early as you can, it's definitely worth it. Yeah, for sure.
What haven't we talked about? What haven't I asked you that I should?
I think the only thing that we've hit at it is I do believe that one of the things that we can do as a veteran community, and we're going to need civilians too, is to really address some of the moral injuries and mental health issues that have come out of this very, very long war, and not just assume that they're going to go away or that our guys are going to just process it and move on. I think there's a lot of good work that can be done at a community level, whether you have a nonprofit or not, to address this. And one of the things that we're doing is through storytelling and is our play. Last Out, Elegy of a Green Beret, and it's an all veteran cast and military family members, and it's about the Afghan war, but more importantly, it's storytelling from the stage by those who lived it, about a special operator NCO and his family, and what the impact of that long war had on all of them.
What is the key to storytelling? What makes a good story?
Struggle is there are every story must have a character. It must have goals. The character must have goals, and there must be struggle between the character and those goals.
Do you break it down all the way down, like to where it's very meticulously scientific, like a nutshell technique kind of formality to it?
I believe there's an art and a science to storytelling, right? And all of us are storytellers. In fact, your brain and my brain is a metaphorical pattern matching organ. So the brain actually makes sense of the world through story. It tells itself a story every second of every day, moment by moment, scene by scene. So you're living a story every moment. And we're all instinctive storytellers. You put a beer in our hands, we can tell a story, right? But what I believe, particularly veterans and military family members and first responders, we have been gifted a rucksack full of scars, inside and outside, that we can repurpose into the service of others through stories. And that's actually how humans have evolved socially, is through the power of storytelling to overcome obstacles, to deal with things. I mean, if you think about like what you do, I mean, you're storytelling all the time. You are a storyteller, and putting story into what we do at the epicenter of what we do, it basically creates an environment where the other party can locate themselves in your story and make meaning out of their own lived experience through your story.
Yeah.
And so for veterans in particular, I think it's a pretty exciting thing, because it's a way for us to heal ourselves. There's evidence-backed studies that show that stories heal the brain. But there's also that's the best way to bridge that civil military gap we were talking about.
Yeah.
Because if I'm talking about the things that I went through, losing friends in combat and decisions that I made and blaming myself or whatever it is, but there's people who have never served a day in the military that are going to locate themselves in some version of that.
Yeah.
It's universal. And that's for me has been the coolest thing, is that when you can connect people or show people a process to design and deliver their story for real impact, man, it's off to the races.
Yeah. Amen. I love it. I love what you're doing. So Task Force Pineapple is the nonprofit, or the other, or you got two of them, right?
Yeah, two nonprofits. Operation Pineapple Express is the book that chronicles what a group of veterans, among many other groups, did to get about 1,000 Afghans out of country, mostly commandos and special forces. It's also on Audible. I read it myself. There's like 18 characters in it. Nice. It's a pretty cool listen.
You use different voices and all that?
Yep, but I didn't do accents. I just did different tonality.
Yeah.
But it was kind of tough to keep up with when you get to about page 200.
Fuck, I can imagine. I wouldn't be able to keep track of
it. You should give it a listen. It moves like a movie, and the Audible version is really cool. But so as a result of that, we founded a nonprofit relief fund called Operation Pineapple Express Relief. And what it's for really is it's a slush fund for Afghans in duress, because we've got Afghan commandos that are still over there that need food. We've got guys over here whose families are stuck over there. And so we've got this relief fund that we can push money out for food drops, medical supplies, and things like that to help keep them alive through the winter until they can join the resistance or get their ass over here or whatever. So that's that nonprofit. And then our other one, our big one, is the Hero's Journey, and that's our storytelling nonprofit. It has the play Last Out that travels around the country with Gary Sinise, and then we run storytelling workshops around the country for Gold Star families, veterans, first responders, and we work with them on how to develop their story and then how to tell it in a job interview, from the stage, talk to your kid about PTS, using narrative as a way to bridge.
Yeah, that's awesome. The Last Out, is there a schedule for where it's going to be? And all
Sure is. If you go to lastoutplay.com, our next performance is in San Diego,
Nice.
May 5 and 6 at the Escondido Theater. But yeah, we're going to be touring with Gary for about 6 months. It's also on Gary's site, and then we're going to keep going with it. My goal is I'd love to see it go off Broadway.
Yeah, that's cool as hell. Where can everybody find you as kind of a hub to keep track of all the things that you've got going on?
You know, we finally got everything consolidated under scottmann.com, and that's worked a lot better. And so if you're interested in any of the stuff we talked about today around human connection or the play or veteran storytelling, you can find it all right there.
Yeah, amen. Well, Scott, Lieutenant Colonel.
Scott's better.
I hear you. Brilliant conversation, man. It's been awesome having you here. Thanks, and really enjoyable for me to be able to ask you a lot of things that I've been curious about, from a higher echelon officer's standpoint in Afghanistan and our country and military, and it certainly did not disappoint. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come here.
Thanks for what you do for our guys, man.
Oh, I mean, it's an honor for sure. In keeping in tradition with all mic drop guests, we do offer a parting gift now.
Oh, man.
A couple of them, actually, thanks to Champion Troy Silver and John Johnston out in California. So on the top there, you go ahead and grab it. I can't reach any further. Got the standard challenge coin with the mic drop logo, and then the Team Dog logo on the back, and then in the box is also for you, which hopefully resonates, being from
oh my God,
from North Carolina.
Hell yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah.
Do you know what? If it's okay with you,
you can show it to the camera.
In the play,
Yeah.
The one prop we have in the play is the Wall of Honor.
Oh, no shit.
And it's a wall of different contributions from families of the fallen, Gold Star families, veterans from Vietnam. But the whole thing is populated with all of these cool tokens. And this will display proudly on the Wall of Honor as we tour the country.
That's
I will put it on there myself.
That's a huge honor. Thank you very much.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
I know John will appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Too, so thank you very much. And again, thanks for coming.
Thanks, Mike.
To you guys, I'm not even going to say I hope you enjoyed it. I know you enjoyed it, because if you didn't, you're going to choke yourself. And I do appreciate the support. Thank you for tuning in show after show to be able to bring amazing guests like Scott on. And until next time, this is Mic Drop.